Everybody, one more minute to join us. My normal 5-minute rule.
Yes.
And whoever is at Ramsey, I very much enjoy your graphic for your.
I think that's the Ramsey Ram, right?
Yep. We have a gas lamp on all of our stuff because Glenbridge still has gas lamps, and that's a whole
That's
whole thing. So all of our stuff are gas lamps, but I like the Ram.
Yeah.
And on that note, thank you everybody for joining us today for another OverDrive training session. Today's is on the new metered access manager with a little bit of, oh no, we have to do reports for last year thrown in. This is brought to you by eBuckles and is part of the training provided by Buckles as part of the strategic plan requirements. And on that note, take it away, Nick.
Thanks, Tina. So I'm going to share my screen, and I've pulled up Tina's marketplace account, and she's been kind enough to allow me to use this as kind of a demonstration for the new purchasing tool and really reporting tool that we've put together to help you kind of manage the expiring metered access titles that you probably have in your Advantage collection. So this is a new tool that lives from the shop tab. If you go to the purchasing tools section, it used to be called automated carts, and notice it kind of calls that out right there. So you'll find all of the kind of automated carts, or these two right here will also give you the ability to generate an automated report that doesn't require the creation of a cart. They all are pretty similar in terms of how you set these up. So once you kind of set one up, today, hopefully, if any of these other kind of plans interest you, you'll be able to set those up as well. They all kind of follow the same type of fields and rules that you can set up. So Tina already has one of these set up, but I'm going to go ahead and set up another one just as an example. So if I click on this metered access manager, you'll see this report is already listed here. So this is the one that's already been set up. Now, if I click on this, it's going to show me the report results. But for the purposes of the training, we're going to go ahead and create a brand new one. And we're just going to kind of use some example parameters of a couple of different ways to set these up in case you want to kind of mimic what you've done before, or what's kind of popular with other libraries. So a lot of libraries will split these up by the type of metered access title that they are, or lending model rather. That was kind of the way that we used to generate the automated carts for you. So if you still wanted to look at them kind of individually, then you certainly can. So the most popular way to do that probably would be something like this. So only including the metered by time, or excuse me, metered by checkout items. So, 5 or fewer is pretty popular. That was the setting that we used to use on the ones that would come into your accounts automatically that we generated for you. So I'm just going to leave it at 5. We're going to leave this at both concurrent users and then the one checkout, or excuse me, by checkout one user. So the concurrent users is that new lending model we offer where there's 100 checkouts that can be used concurrently or simultaneously by multiple users at the same time. So that'll pull in both those lending models, anything that has 5 checkouts or fewer. So let's say I'm, going to be, doing this by selector. Maybe I have a YA and JV selector and an adult selector, and everybody, kind of wants to look at just their own individual sections. So, maybe I just want to include adult fiction and adult nonfiction for this one specifically. So if I remove all of these out of here by selecting them all and then hitting this double arrow, I forgot does them all. So if I instead select them all and then just hit the single arrow rather, I'll end up with just these audience levels in my cart or report. It's giving me a few options here. I'm not going to tailor the price at all because I do want to kind of see everything that's nearing expiration regardless of the price. I'm gonna not include titles that are in pending carts because I'm already working on purchasing something. There's no sense in, including it twice. I want to avoid duplications there. I'm not going to separate this by format. I could obviously here, if I wanted to uncheck one of these, I could just have only ebooks or audiobooks in the report or the cart. I'm going to not have weeded titles included in the cart because chances are if you've weeded an expired title, it's going to be for a reason. There's no reason to really kind of look at that again. If you feel like you want to, you could include weeded titles obviously here if you want to. So should titles be included if users can access other copies through Advantage Plus? This is kind of up to you. This is a nice option that's new in this tool, especially for a group like yours that shares everything upon purchase. So if you're kind of very budget conscious and you're thinking, well, if there's other copies in the collection available, then, maybe I don't want to repurchase something, you could always check no here, and then that would kind of not include things that were already shared by other libraries. I'm not going to put any kind of other parameters here in languages. If I wanted to, I can put some additional fields in here in terms of holds and checkouts. This is also kind of a nice addition from the previous tools that we had to manage metered access content. So let's say I want to make sure that everything has a hold that, I'm going to consider repurchasing. And it had to have, let's say, 13 checkouts in the last 12 months. That would give me a $2 per circ cost if it's the 26 checkout model. Not the greatest, but you could obviously change this to whatever you feel like is the best for you to meet your needs. So if I want to, I can have this generate a cart automatically. You'll see it's defaulting to no. And if I click save here, what this is going to do is create a report for me that it will be only metered by checkout titles. You'll see here, it's telling me only these lending models are included. They have to be expiring titles, so fiber checkouts are fewer. And this isn't going to generate a cart, whereas the one that Tina has set up already is going to generate a cart. Now, if I click on this, if there are any titles that met this criteria, then they would be showing up here. So there's none here because chances are Tina's already kind of gone through these. Anything that had holds on it and was pretty near expiration, it was probably weeded or repurchased. So you'll kind of over time, you'll see things pop up in there depending on how open the parameters are you set. So for example, if I look at the other one that she's got in here that's already set up, there are some things in here, and you're going to find a lot of data on this report that's not present on, other reports like our old smart list. So you'll see these are all hyperlinked. I can kind of go in and look at title details if I want right from the report results. The street dates there as well, the lending model, the price. This one looks like TBD. It's probably because there is two different options. Yeah, so you have a couple of different options there. And if there's cost per circ available, this is new as well in this tool. So if you're kind of looking and you're, again, kind of trying to maybe be budget conscious and maybe this title isn't something that you think is going to be super popular, but you want to, ensure that maybe you fill a couple of holds, you always could add something in cost per circ. It's automatically telling you that that's available there and that's the price.
Nick, is that something that's going to be added to other reports? Because that would be super helpful to be able to see, particularly like in holds and other things, to be able to see if it's available as cost per circ, and if so, what the price.
Yeah, absolutely. This is kind of like the first step towards the one shop initiative. Hopefully, we're targeting this year. I hope it happens this year where, every lending model will be included in the same place as you're shopping. So, for example, when I go to something like this, where it was TBD, this one would also say cost per circ, $1.49 or whatever it was. So everything would be presented there. But yeah, I definitely do expect CPC with the one shop initiative to start showing up in more and more reports.
Awesome.
You can see additional ownership details here. This is kind of interesting. There's advanced checkouts, or excuse me, advanced plus checkouts remaining. So again, if you're kind of, budget conscious and looking whether or not to repurchase things, if you notice that, maybe something already has a lot of checkouts remaining by other copies shared by other libraries, maybe it's not necessarily something that you do need to repurchase at your library. The other cool thing about this tool is you can weed or unweed right from it. So if you do include weeded titles in the report results, then you could see some things that are weeded in here. If I wanted to weed right from this report, I can. So that's another kind of advantage to the report itself. It's kind of intended to be a one-stop shop for all of kind of your expiring metered access items. So if you determine while you're looking at this report that you want to remove something from the Advantage collection, that you're not going to purchase it again, you can actually weed it right from the report results itself. So that's the metered access manager. I don't think, when I looked in here, I don't think Tina had any carts, but they would show up in here as these are select lists. They would be a purchasing tool, or it might say automated cart. Do you recall what they're saying now since we changed that verbiage, Tina? Have you noticed?
They come up in other carts, and I do this. I have a tendency to do this thing where I do my regular process and then I go, oh no, we have a training. Why did I get rid of the cart? But it shows up as other carts, and it shows up I believe with the name of the plan. So it comes up as
okay.
the
So
OT
actually say
meter.
metered access manager. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So those would show up here, and then anything that you're actually creating manually would be showing up there. And again, the nice thing about these, if you're not somebody that wants those carts to show up, you don't necessarily have to. So this one I chose generate cart, no. So if anything kind of shows up, I still have this report that I can run periodically, but not generating a cart. So create another one, just an example. And for this one, I'm just going to do MA by time. And instead of the checkouts, I'm just going to leave the time ones on here. So this one has earlier or, so I do need to have a value in there. So I'm just going to stick with that 5. I'm going to stick with the 30-day in here. So this will bring in anything that's expiring 30 days or less in terms of the meter by time title. So that would include anything that's 12-month lease or a 24-month lease. And then we still have some of this kind of earlier or, typically it's like 24 months or 52 checkouts. So that'll show up in here as well, depending on the time or checkout remaining. I'm going to, maybe I'm just gonna, I just want audiobooks in this one. So I'm going to choose that there. Still going to have nothing in other pending carts included. And maybe for this one, I'm just going to do my JV and Weiss. I did the same thing. Okay. And I'm going to leave the holds off this one since it didn't have any results last time. Checkouts, I am going to put a minimum in here of, let's say, 12 in the last 12 months, or actually I'll change that to 10. And maybe this one I do want to generate a cart, so I'll choose yes. Well, actually, I'm in Tina's account. I don't want this to generate a cart. So I'm gonna still leave this at no, and I'll save it. And you'll see the other one shows up here as well. So you can have as many of these as you want. So again, if you do have multiple selectors, maybe somebody does ebooks, somebody does audiobooks, or like I said earlier, maybe it's by audience, you can have multiple plans set up here. And again, if anything was kind of meeting these criteria, that would show up in the report results here. And it's always going to show me my parameters up here as well. So if I'm kind of wondering, why something isn't showing up in here, I could always edit the plan by either, or actually you'd have to go into the plan itself and then click edit plan. And I could change this if I wanted to. So let's just say 5, maybe there might be some stuff that way. Still nothing. Tina just has a really clean Advantage account in terms of expired items, I think. So I'm going to go ahead and delete these. You can delete these at any time. Like I said, you can have as many as you want. And then we'll leave the one that she has set up in there. We did automatically create one in everyone's Advantage account. So you should see something along these lines in your Advantage account right now that you could always start with if you wanted to. So if I wanted to edit this at all, I can click on it and then edit the plan. So if I'm seeing too much in here, maybe, or you know, like I said, maybe if you have multiple people working with OverDrive and you want to separate some things out, you could always kind of tailor the existing one to your liking and then add another one, or just kind of delete them and then start from scratch. But everyone should have one set up automatically in there. So
Nick, we had a question of,
sure.
Does this return results that are already expired or only about to expire?
So you can actually, it's a good question. So if I created a new plan and let's say instead of expiring titles, I want expired, you can start that way if you'd like. So, you know, let's say you're starting from scratch and you know you have a bunch of stuff that's already expired and you still want to use this tool. You can create a plan with expired, but then maybe create another one, you know, for moving forward for things that were expiring, you know, in the future. So that's an option here when you actually do create the plan, is just to have it include expired.
And that might be a good way also to be able to, if you do one that expired with holds, that will be a good way to be able to see if one of your patrons puts a hold on something that's expired, and you can get an idea.
Absolutely.
I have to edit our plan because I'm excited that I can now do by holds, because inevitably I look at it and then I sort by holds. So now I can just weed those out, which is exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is a cool option too. You know, you can, a lot of people have a safe search for this, but this kind of gives you some additional parameters to filter off certain things that are already expired. For additional kind of resources on this new tool, we do have a training that should be in here already. So if I went to the resource center by going to the support tab, where all my contact information is, there's a button for the resource center. And then under library and staff training on how-to videos, there is holds and metered access management. And there's a new overview, creating plans, and then even things that are no longer available for sale. So a lot of additional resources if you want to kind of get some more advanced knowledge of that tool overall. And these
Nick,
have,
can you include the link to that when you send me the recording so we can send that out to everybody?
Sure.
We also had a question which is slightly related, but probably more about weeding than about metered access. But if I wanted to weed already expired titles, would I create a cart and then weed the entire cart, or would you still weed individual titles within the cart? This would be better. My answer to this would be better suited to use the weeding
absolutely
tool.
Yes. So this has always kind of been my recommendation for your automatic weeding plan. We did set up everyone with an automatic weeding plan a few years ago on your Advantage accounts, but you may want to tweak it a little bit. I think I probably mentioned this on other trainings if anybody's been to them, so I apologize if it's kind of something that you already heard, but this is kind of the best option in my opinion, because you're just going to go ahead and weed everything that's expired that has no holds. Chances are, you know, if the other libraries could have some of this content in their Advantage accounts that are already shared. So, you know, if your patrons want to read it down the line and they don't have a hold on it right now, there's chances are that a lot of the stuff is probably going to have, you know, other copies available. But this just kind of allows your collection to stay a little bit more cleaner in terms of not having copies in there that a patron would be able to place a hold on. And not, you know, get the title without you repurchasing it. So this will automatically weed everything that meets these criteria. And then the report that we just went through is kind of more for things that are nearing expiration. But, you know, like the question that we just had, you can also use it to kind of clean up the things that are already expired. But if the goal really is to kind of weed things in bulk, like Tina said, I would probably use this weeding tool. Any other questions on the metered access manager? No.
Not in the chat. If anybody wants to ask out loud, they certainly can, or you can put it in the chat. I will ask for you.
All right, I'll bite.
Yay, Molly.
Does this also work for the central shared collection or only like I don't have access to it. I checked, I was curious, but
That would be separate. So when you log in your Advantage account and set up one of these, it's going to be specifically looking at your Advantage copies. But the share collection would have access to do this as well. So whoever's managing that would have.
yeah, because I have access to the shared collection, but I evidently do not have that permission. That's what I was.
Really? Okay.
I have limited permissions because I don't purchase. So
Oh,
right.
okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
I look there. Purchasing tools is not listed when I'm signed into my shared collection account. So
Yeah, if you don't
that's more of a Dave question, I think.
Exactly. Yeah, I think if you don't have purchasing permissions, then this probably wouldn't be, something that you would see.
I mean, I would just be curious to look at it from an aggregating perspective. Like if I see that there's something that's expired and has a lot of holds, I might want to buy it, but
let me know if you just want this for reporting purposes. From the shared collection perspective, then I can always change your permissions if I don't know if you have to ask Dave.
But yeah, I have to ask Dave.
And Dave will probably change the permissions too.
He can't.
Although sometimes it depends on how granular the options are.
Yeah. A lot of the fields are in advanced search, but there's definitely kind of some more tools like the checkouts and holds, and then the ability to weed is in here as well. That's not in a saved search that you would have access to without the purchasing permission. Any other questions on this side of things? No. Okay.
Not in the chat.
So for end of year reporting, go through a couple of different things that you could potentially need. Start with the easier with the two first, and this is just kind of your overall holdings numbers. So from what I've heard from New Jersey libraries in the past, a lot of times you may have to provide to the state the amount of titles that you had available to your patrons for access digitally, whether it be total, so shared collection and your Advantage account, or just that you purchased. So you may need one or the other or both. So I'm going to kind of go through how you would collect both of those. So the holding section is on the landing page of the Insights tab. So if I just click on Insights, I'm going to see this towards the middle of the screen. This may not default to this date. It may be defaulting to today's date. To change that, all you have to do is click on the pencil and you can type in a date or use the calendar feature there. But for our purposes, we're going to keep this at 12/31 since, it's end of year state reporting. That's technically probably going to be what you need. So you'll notice there's numbers here already with nothing clicked. This is essentially everything checked. So if I'm an Advantage library and I just want to see, what I have in my Advantage collection at the end of last year, I can just click that Advantage button. And these numbers would reflect everything that's just in the Glen Ridge Advantage account only. And then if I wanted to, like I mentioned earlier, if I'm looking to report to the state everything total that my patrons have access to, then I can check all these boxes, and this would be the grand total in terms of the number of copies and titles that patrons have access to. Any questions on that? Pretty easy in terms of getting these numbers. So if I uncheck these again, I'm going to have those same numbers for the Advantage account that we had before. So other thing that you could potentially be looking at for end of year reporting or just in general throughout the year is how your content that you've purchased is actually going out, and then maybe you could, potentially want to see, what else your patrons are checking out from an ownership standpoint. So it does require a little bit of manipulation, but I think, Tina mentioned at the beginning of the call, I do have like a little bit of a cheat sheet for this as well. So don't get too overwhelmed as I'm kind of going through this. We do kind of have like a step-by-step guide, but most of the work that you actually have to do when you're looking at something like this is done through Excel. So if I start with the checkouts report from the Insights tab, and that dialog box will automatically happen. If I ever want to change my parameters, I just click Run New Report. So checkouts by, the top filter is always going to dictate how the data is presented to me once the report's run. So for this example, let's just say we want to look at the December checkouts, and the branch is going to indicate where the patron actually came from that made that checkout. So if I leave this Glenridge branch in here, I'm only looking at my patrons' checkouts. Okay. If I wanted to see, for instance, how other libraries were borrowing my content in my Advantage account, then I would need to remove the branch filter here. So for our purposes, if you're just looking to do state reporting and you're just looking at your own patrons' activity, I'm going to leave the branch filter in here.
Nick, we had a question about
Sure.
What is the default for the holdings if none of the filters are selected?
That should be the same as having them all selected.
Okay, so that would be everything, because the person is doing this in my OverDrive at the same time, and the numbers are different when all the filters are selected as opposed to none of the filters.
Go back to that. So none.
So none is the whole, includes the shared collection.
I noticed the first time it was a little off, and then the second time I did it, it got back to this normal one. So let me try this again, actually. So I'm getting this, see, it changed there. I don't know why. Okay, for some reason, sometimes it's not reflecting Advantage Plus. You may have to just ensure that if you're looking to get the full total, it should, these two numbers should match if you have them all checked, or if you don't have them all checked. See, it just took a second to reflect there. See.
Okay. So yeah, so sometimes the reporting can be a little slow. So give it a second to
yeah, I think it's pulling a lot of data in here, so it may take a second to refresh. But yeah. So okay, checkouts. So I always kind of recommend, especially for our purposes today, if you're looking at checkouts and where they came from in terms of who purchased the copy, I always go with this top option. It's going to show me everything regardless of who bought the copy, whether it be the shared collection or any Advantage account. So I'm not going to put any other formats or filters rather here, and I'm going to leave these dates in here, 12/1 to 12/31. So it's just going to show me again checkouts by month for this period for just my patrons, regardless of who purchased the titles. So that month is again dictating what is going to be shown here for me. So if I click update, it's just going to show me December checkouts. And so I have about 2,000 there from Tina's library, and you'll notice that's a hyperlink. So because I ran this by month, it's showing me the full month total. If I drill into either the month number or the checkout number, I'm going to come up with the full list of details for those checkouts. And here's where it kind of gets a little tricky. You can't really do this using this report very easily. So I always recommend creating a worksheet. And so I'm going to stop this share. And open this Excel file, which typically will end up in your downloads folder if you don't catch it right away.
Also, don't forget Nick's going to be sending out a how-to, so don't freak out trying to write all of the directions down.
Exactly.
He's going to
Yes.
send us a how to do this that will be included with your meeting recording and evaluation stuff that Darlene sends out later.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, so share. So, okay. So now I have all of these checkouts in, can you still see my Excel screen?
Yes.
Okay, so now I have all of the checkouts from December, and you'll notice the branch is all the same because we put that filter there. So this means every single one of these checkouts was from a Glen Ridge patron. Now, if I'm trying to figure out, how many of these 2,000 plus checkouts were on my content versus how many were on other people's Advantage content or the shared collection, I can do a couple of different things. I'll go through the kind of the easiest one first. And that's really just putting filters on this. So if I highlight the top row that has the column headings and I go over to data and I click on filter, I'm going to have filters on every column now. So under the bought by field, which is in AA on this spreadsheet, if I expand this a little bit, you can see the individual library names. This will allow me to filter for a couple of different things. Let's say I just want to figure out how many of these checkouts were on my items, the copies that I purchased. So 155 out of 274 were just those Advantage copies. Conversely, maybe I want to see just shared collection. So 1150, more than half were actually from the shared collection. A lot of those were magazines probably in here. You'll see the format will be listed as well. Now, if you want to get a little bit more technical and give yourself totals from whoever purchased the content in a kind of an easier way to look at that, I can place a pivot table on the file. So you may not always need something like this. The filtering is a quick and easy way to just check your own numbers or the shared collection numbers. But if you want to kind of see all copies, where they came from, who purchased those, I can highlight the entire worksheet by clicking on this top left-hand corner and then insert menu and then pivot table. And I don't have to change anything here. I'm just literally just going to press OK. Now, a new sheet will pop up on my Excel file. And the only couple of things that we have to do here is drag a couple of fields into these squares. The squares are going to dictate how the data is presented on this table. So branch, if we remember, was the library name. Now, everything's going to be the same branch because we filtered that already. Now, so what I'm really interested in for my purposes here is who purchased the titles that or the copies rather that my patrons checked out. So if I click on bought by and I drag it to rows, I'll have all the Advantage libraries listed here. And checked out, I'm going to put in values. And you'll see a breakdown of where all of these 2074 checkouts came from. And if I want to get even a little bit more technical, I can sort this. If I go to more sort options, I'm going to do descending by kind of checked out, and then I can see what were the most used Advantage accounts in terms of where these copies came from. The other really nice thing about pivot tables is, maybe I'm Tina and I'm looking at this report and I'm thinking, what are the titles that are being checked out for my Advantage account? Maybe I want to make sure I'm getting more of that same type of content. These are actually really kind of hyperlinked, so to speak. So if I click on this 155, it's actually going to open up a brand new sheet of just those 155 checkouts that came from my Advantage account. So if I want to kind of do a quick survey of, all right, what are these publishers? Maybe what are the subjects? What are the titles that are going out from my Advantage account? Maybe I want to get, more copies of those, or again, maybe kind of hit on those specific subjects, that type of thing. So a lot you can do with pivot tables, but again, for our purposes here today, if you're really just kind of looking at, what are my patrons checking out and where did that come from? You can simply just put a filter on the resulting Excel file that you export and then kind of go through and filter off what you want if you want to just do it in a kind of a simple fashion. I know that was kind of a lot. Any questions on this process at all? Again, I'll be sending kind of a cheat sheet.
Nothing is currently in the chat. But again, if you would like to simply ask your question, go right ahead. Molly wants to know if this includes CPC circs.
Yes, it would. Those would be listed. So if Tina had anything CPC,
which I should.
I don't know if this actually has a lending model. Let's see.
So it just shows it as a checkout.
Probably, yeah, probably these 0 ones I'm getting. Or I see here. Yeah, because if you didn't technically.
Yeah, because it just considers it a checkout.
Yeah.
It's very weird.
That's a good point, though. It would be nice if that actually showed the lending model in here. Any other questions on this?
So while we're giving everyone a minute to think of their questions, I'll just jump in with a few closing remarks. And if anybody does have any questions, please put them in the chat box. Or as Tina said, you can unmute yourself as well. So I would like to thank Nick for another great presentation for us. We appreciate that. I'd like to thank Tina Marie for arranging the training for us, again, as part of our centralized training for mandated services. I'd like to thank everyone here who came to take time out of your day to listen and learn. We will be sending a post-event evaluation, as Tina said. It'll include a link to the recording. Nick's going to share some great handouts with us that we can share. And there'll also be a link to an evaluation just to get your feedback on today's session. If you could please respond, we would appreciate it. And we'll also be sending you attendance certificates for your own files. So I don't know if there's any other questions. I'm not seeing anything. Maybe
looks like we got slightly off topic, but in patron interest, I filtered everything, so I see only. Is that the correct way to do it? Okay, so I can definitely go through this. It's kind of related to the metered access manager, so let me share my screen. So the notify me tags, if you're using the sorry, who's in the, this was Tatiana. If you're using the patron interest manager, that's how I would personally be looking at the titles that your patrons have tagged with notify me. You can see it on this dashboard on the insights tab, patron interests. And then if you filter for your Advantage account, you'll see them that way as well. This is kind of meant to be a dashboard. It's really not meant to be a report. I would, if you're looking for a more granular way of looking at that, I would definitely use the patron interest manager. So for instance, this one's set up with 2 or more. If I click on this, it's going to have a lot more data than that dashboard report does. So, it has street day price, whether or not it's weeded, should have, I can.
You can also set it to create carts for you, just like in the metered
Yeah.
access manager. So you can, I think every 2 weeks I get a cart that I can look at to see what my patrons have requested.
Mhm.
And I did the 2 because I have like a million things. I have 1. And I'm not buying all of the things that have 1, so I set it to 2.
Exactly. Yeah. And this looks very, very similar to what we went through today. That's why I kind of mentioned that at the beginning of the training is, hopefully as a result of that metered access manager training, you'll be able to set up one of these up as well. But this gives you that same option. So you don't have to generate the cart. If you want to, you can just save the plan. You can kind of choose whether or not you want it to generate. And then if you want to set a cadence, you have a few different options there. So if I click no here, you can just save it that way. So Tina's looking at these specific Advantage accounts. And I can have, again, as many of these as I want. The second part, there a way for CPC price to be
Nick, do you want to just give everybody an update about the initiative of I don't know what the official name is. I think it is all the things together.
One time. Yeah. I think, so to answer your question, Tatiana, I think CPC price being in here would be a great addition. I'll put in a development request in for that, but I think that is something that is kind of related to the one shop initiative that Tina just mentioned. So what we're kind of striving for is, we know that folks like a variety of different lending models, and not everybody's the same in those kind of preferences, and you may have situations where different things work better for programming or the popularity of something in your community, etc. So for instance, this one, we have a couple of different options right now for this particular ebook. The first is the 1 copy, 1 user lending model. So that's our old school traditional lending model. This is that new one that I mentioned earlier. 100 checkouts can be used simultaneously. In one shop, if this title was available in CPC, you'd see that CPC price here as well. I'm not sure how the carts are going to work because it's still kind of separate in terms of budgeting for CPC titles, but I'm guessing you'd be able to kind of add this title right from the screen to your CPC offerings. Whereas right now, CPC, as you guys know, I'm guessing is, completely separate catalog. I have to add CPC titles only in this section. So it's completely separate from everything that's 1 copy, 1 user and metered access. But I definitely like the idea of putting the CPC price in there with a link to it, just like metered access. Maybe that's a good idea.
We'd like that everywhere.
Yeah, definitely.
Also, just a reminder, my friendly reminder about the concurrence is that those are shared amongst everybody. So you're not buying 100 checkouts for your individual library's patrons. You are buying 100 checkouts for everybody. And so that is the thing that I like to make sure everybody is aware of. So there's no surprises when you wake up and see that your 100 fourth wing checkouts are all gone.
Yep, absolutely. And then the other part of your question, there isn't a way to see which titles were borrowed in a given period of time that were from Notify Me. Once the title is purchased, the tags go away. Tags are all anonymized because if I'm a patron and I have multiple library cards and I tag something with a Notify Me tag, all of the libraries that I have within Libby are actually going to get notified of that tag in their marketplace accounts. So we can have tags being satisfied by other libraries. So you could have, a patron that has a couple of different library cards and, another one of their libraries purchases the title. So.
And Nick, there's a limit to the number of notify me's that a patron can have at one time, right? No?
No, there's not actually.
Okay. There used to be when you were making recommendations.
Recommendations there was, yeah, that was more tied to the fact that they created that automatic hold. But yeah, a patron can remove them or add them at any time. And they're listed on their shelf and tags. And then you can kind of see in Marketplace as well on that dashboard, in the given time period that you select, how many tags are being added per patron.
Awesome.
Any other questions on any of this stuff?
There is a limit on the number of cost per circuit borrows, and that is set at the consortium level, correct, Nick?
It is.
Yeah.
And then I do want to add, if anybody's kind of setting up, whether it be the metered access manager, patron interest manager, or even kind of going through the reporting, if you get tripped up or just want a little bit of extra assistance or something like that, you can always reach out to me directly. We can set up a Zoom call, or I can walk you through things over the phone too. So.
And all of the contact information for our team is available on the support tab in Marketplace. So if you're ever like, wait, how do I get in touch with the lovely Nick for more help? Just log into Marketplace, click on support, and you'll see the individual information. For Nick, Sheila, who is or not Sheila, we have a new Sheila. Alicia. I swear, I just got used to Sheila, and now I have there's another person. We have a content person, and then Bart is our sort of technical API guru. But generally, if you have a question, my recommendation is start with Nick, and if you're not sure, and he will direct you to whoever you need to go to. All right, everybody, thank you so much. Darlene, do you have any last things that you need to tell us?
I think we are good. I just wanted to thank you again, thank Nick, and thank everyone for joining us. Have a good afternoon.
Have a great day, everybody. Thank you.